Kathryn Lopez, a senior fellow at the National Review Institute and editor-at-large of National Review, has written extensively on abortion throughout the country. Thanks so much for coming back on our program, Kathryn. In the case about regulating abortion we just mentioned in Colorado and in North Dakota, we're seeing two ends of the spectrum here. Do you think that states will eventually come around to some kind of middle ground?
I think what you're seeing is how it's going to play out in states like North Dakota, where there's more of a consensus that abortion is not a good. You're going to see the ban like we see there. Other places, it's going to be impossible. I mean, I'm coming to you from New York. Our governor wants to continue to expand abortion. Our mayor wants to give out free abortion pills, is doing so. And so this is what we're going to see play out. You know, I think last June, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, there was a sense that this somehow was, at least in the media, that this was the end of abortion, right? No, not at all. And now part of the debate you're seeing play out is, so is this really a states issue for the long term? If it's a states issue, what is that supposed to look like? If you're a pro-lifer, what are you supposed to be supporting? Now, the fact of the matter is, if you believe abortion is wrong, we want no abortions in America, but we're a far cry from there. And Nikki Haley, who's running for president, gave a speech that made a lot of good points this week, where she talked about the importance of changing the culture. She talked beautifully about her husband, who was adopted, who came from a very broken situation where the birth parents really couldn't care for him, and the importance of talking about that and really working to change the culture, because there are states like Colorado where you're never going to be able to pass a law like North Dakota was until you do a lot of work. And pro-lifers need to be praying, especially Catholics, especially prayers for prudence, compassion, and courage from politicians, because there are a lot of Republicans who don't want to be touching this.
That's right.
And don't want to be, certainly don't want to go to 6-week ban territory. But of course, we know that's when the heartbeat is present. Right. And so that seems like the humane thing to do. But there are states where you're not going to be able to do that right now.
Well, let's talk about that issue before you tell us that. Knowing that life begins in the womb, we know that. Can Catholics support incremental limits to abortion? It sounds like you're saying that, but let's get right to the heart of that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one was more pro-life than Cardinal O'Connor, who in New York, who founded the Sisters of Life. And he talked about the fact that in good conscience, Catholics can vote for incremental measures. The fact of the matter is, if you're going to be preventing abortions where you weren't preventing abortions at all right, we're making progress. But we also have to be clear, this isn't enough. You can't just check that box and say we're done in whatever state we're in. No, there's more work that has to be done. But if you are saving lives, the incremental approach is okay. There's no moral reason that you can't do that, unless, you know, if the politician is making clear, look, I'm placating you people. All right, well, that's a debate we have to have with that politician. Still, it may be possible to vote for the law in whatever given state. But yeah, no, this is time for prudence. And also, I think there's something to be said. My colleague at National Review, Ramesh Panu, has written consistently and clearly about this. I don't know that pro-lifers can have litmus tests for primary candidates because, again, depending on what state you're in, there are certain things you're going to be able to get away with and certain things you're not going to be able to get away with. I mean, think about a state like Michigan, where pro-lifers were said to have lost. Well, you've got a governor who is avidly pro-abortion, and pro-abortion is the right word. I don't use that for everyone who considers themselves pro-choice, but she is. And the other thing, quickly, Montse, that I think we need to be weary of is the media declaring that every election where pro-lifers seem to lose is proof that being opposed to abortion is a losing issue. If you look at the midterm elections, there were governors like Mike DeWine won by like 25 points, and there were a couple other examples of Republican governors who were clearly pro-life, supported restrictions after Roe, didn't lose by a lot. And so be wary. We are going to lose elections in part because of that, and we have to be okay with that as well. But it is not the loser that the media portrays it as.
That's right. It's all part of bringing up this discussion again into the public square. Really quick, last question for you, Kathryn. You talked about Nikki Haley and abortion being a huge topic in the presidential race. Will there be any efforts to help women, aside from making sure that we are allowed to have birth in our country? What happens next?
Well, this is the critical thing. There hasn't been a lot of media attention on Texas and the supports that they had as part of their protecting unborn human life. Lynn Fitch in Washington last week at the Heritage Foundation talked about how in Mississippi, not only did they, overturn Roe versus Wade for us, but have all these supports for women, including, simple things that everyone should be able to support. An app for a woman who's pregnant. What are my resources? What are my options? And and Nikki Haley spoke to this a lot in her speech. We have to make clear that we are for women and babies and flourishing, and pushing abortion is not good for women. Women deserve better. This has been a constant theme of the pro-life movement. And we also have to tell the stories, as you do, thank you, Montse, about people on the front lines who really accompany women, because the pro-life movement is a movement of love.
Well, Kathryn, it looks like we're going to have a lot to continue tracking, both at the state level, but also with these cases going back up to the Supreme Court. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Montse.